You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So, for a while in the early 2000s, I would say really in and around 2009, 2010, I got really into stand-up. And I mean, to the point where it was basically all I listened to. I only listened to podcasts with stand-ups. I watched almost exclusively stand-up show, like specials and stuff on TV. It was nuts. And one of the things that I did during that time as an exercise, a mental exercise really, is I wrote stand-up. Now, when I say I wrote stand-up, I mean I wrote it for me to tell and no one to hear. Because if I'm being honest, none of it was good enough to actually go on stage and do, but it was there. And one of the jokes I had in the set was that it should have been pretty clear to myself and everyone in my life that I was going to grow up to be a lonely nerd. And the reason that that should have been apparent has to do with the topic of today's show. And the way the story goes is that the little girl from down the street would come to play with me, come over for a play date or whatever. And I would spend all of my time by myself imagining and pretending that I was part of the group that we're going to talk about in today's topic. Meanwhile, she would have to sit on the swing. And well, I'll explain it in a minute. This is Get to Know the Devil's Advocates, first Fandoms on the Devil's Advocates. What's up, the internet? It's the Devil's Advocates. How's it going? I am producer Kyle, and that is Bronze Age Nerd. Welcome in.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. I'm wearing my headphones again, and your voice sounds very soft and smooth today.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. It's the difference between a high-quality speaker and a low-quality speaker. However, I cannot stand the sound of myself.
Yeah. It's always harder in your monitor to hear yourself.
What's up, everybody? This is Devil's Advocates. Today's topic is getting to know the Devil's Advocates, and we want to get to know you as well. So we are talking about our first fandoms today, and why first fandoms kind of mean so much to people. So I want to encourage you in chat, Buddy, Mr. Nope, Kenneth, whoever else is in the chat, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, on X. Tell us what your first fandom was. And later on, we're going to open up the phone lines, something we haven't done in a very long time, to let you potentially call in and talk about your first fandom. Does that sound like a fair thing?
It sounds more than fair.
Cool. So the joke I was telling during the cold open is that the little girl from down the street would come over for a play date. And I was always a Ghostbuster, and she was always a ghost, and she would get captured because I had the trap and deposited in the vault, which was the swing set. And then I would go off to fight imaginary ghosts while she sat there.
Oh, this poor girl.
Yeah.
I love that she had to be a ghost, like not.
Well, there weren't any Ghostbusters because I hadn't seen Ghostbusters 2 yet. Like, Janine was just a receptionist, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say she could at least be sending you out on the calls or something after she got captured the first time.
Nope. She was always Gozer the Gozerian, man. And
I mean, that is a pretty cool character, to be fair.
It's true. I'm like, I thought I was doing all right, but like, no, she was always angry. Like, why do you get to be Egon and I have to be sitting here? Well,
oh, nice.
So it turns into one of these things. Like, pretty early on, I realized what my first fandom was. And or what, like, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, but Bronze, do you have an early or a very clarion memory of the GI Joe? Your first earliest memory?
Yeah, it's weird. It's not a very clear memory because I can't tell you even which Joe it is, but I remember going out to dinner with my parents, and I think we were celebrating some sort of holiday, some sort of, like, I don't know if it was their anniversary or something like that. And I got my first 3 3/4, GI Joe from, I'm pretty sure, the first wave, which means I was pretty young when it happened, because that first wave came out when I was like 2. So it was probably, they sold it for like 2 years. So it was probably like, I was probably like 3 or 4, probably too young for a GI Joe that small. But hey, I took right to it. I know that little Joe did not survive, but I remember getting it and being instantly obsessed with everything about that toy. Like, just the size, the accessories. It was like, it was just perfectly made for me, basically.
Nice. So, one of the things that fascinates me about nerds is their obsession with their first fandom. You very seldom meet somebody in the nerd culture, in our realm, that can't say, "Oh, here's the moment," right? Here's the thing. Here is the thing I can info dump on you about at any given time, and you didn't ask.
Yep.
And why we hold these things so closely. So um the topic I wanted to talk about, the original thing I called this was why I always cry at Ghostbusters. Because, like, I haven't seen, other than the third one with Leslie Jones and uh with all the girls, every Ghostbuster movie makes me emotional. Everyone. And I think that has to do with the age at which I discovered the Ghostbusters, right? Um, I was pretty young. Like, I'll be honest, I may or may not have been the age I am now when I discovered how many curse words were actually in the original Ghostbusters movies, because I grew up watching them on cable, right? And then there's stuff that's like not curse words that you thought for sure growing up, oh, that's something that they've replaced,
Yeah.
like, wait, Bill Murray just said that to be funny? That doesn't make any so, um, let's start here, and I can kind of come into this because I wanna set up this a little bit clearer understanding of what we're talking about, right? So, Bronze, talk to me about GI Joe, like, in terms of, you talked about your toy, but what did your growth in this fandom look like? How do you have a memory of it? Do you have a timeline? Do you
Yeah.
remember points?
Yeah. I guess obviously, I told the story about the figure. That was the first moment. It's weird. I remember the first one, but I don't remember any of the like next ones, the ones that came right after that. Um, but I know there had to have been some, of course. And I have memories of like getting more toys on, birthdays and Christmases and that kind of stuff for sure. It's funny, my parents will think this, if they ever watch this stream, they'll think this is hilarious because their favorite Christmas of mine when I was a kid is what they refer to as the Ghostbuster Christmas, because I got like the firehouse and I got the Ecto one and a couple of the figures and stuff like that. And I just went nuts on that Christmas. It was probably, I was right. I was like right at that perfect age, right? I was probably like, what, 6 or something when that happened. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Um, most Christmases had some GI Joe stuff for me, so I guess they kind of just blended together for them in their memories. But there's that. So in the toys, I was an only child, still am. It's not like that changed. And I lived kind of in the middle, not the middle of nowhere, but I lived in a small town out in the country. We didn't have a lot of neighbors. In fact, we basically had no neighbors. So it wasn't like I was playing with a lot of kids after school or anything like that, because unless I went over to their house or went to a birthday party or something like that, I wasn't hanging out with them. So I spent a lot of time, a lot of time with GI Joes. And I remember things like, getting into the cartoon. That definitely came after the figures at some point. I mean, I remember the first time that I was sick as a kid, like, stomach sick, like throwing up, right? I remember it happening during a GI Joe episode and me like running to go get my mom and being like, I don't know what's going on. Like something's going on. I remember watching GI Joe while I got sick for the first time. Right. Maybe there's some kind of hidden meaning there. I don't know. And then the thing that really cemented everything for me, and to this day, to make me who I am, to make me Bronze Age nerd now, and the origin story aspect of all this, was at some point my dad had discovered that there was a GI Joe comic book, and he started bringing them home from his work trips. And I mean, I was, maybe 7 or 8, maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe even a little bit younger than that. And just getting these comic books, I didn't, comic books were something like I'd found some Sad Sack, Beetle Bailey, that kind of stuff at my grandparents' house that were my parents and my uncle's comics when they were kids. I'd found some of those, but they weren't really like anything special to me. But getting these GI Joe comic books and flipping through and seeing the vehicles drawn so carefully and all the characters, that really made a huge impression, like a lasting impression on me. And my dad was like meticulous about it. Like he had a spreadsheet printed out. He'd go around to comic shops when he was traveling, try to find them and try to complete the run for me. So it was really something that at different points in my life, it made such a big impact on my free time, my imagination. Reading like Choose Your Own Adventure, they weren't real Choose Your Own Adventure books, but they were clones or whatever for GI Joe, or some of the first books I read. I remember that kind of stuff. Like it really had a strong impact on pretty much every aspect of my young life.
Yeah, for me, it was not dissimilar. I'll be honest with Ghostbusters. You went GI Joe, I went Ghostbusters. Like we kind of like came to the same intersection and just turned different directions. For me, it was Ariel Ghostbusters,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be honest, I wanted Slimer to be my pet. Like I couldn't have a cat or a dog because allergic and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted a Slimer, and I didn't understand that you couldn't be Slimer. Bronze's camera has decided to die.
I'll be back shortly.
Yeah. So, but I didn't understand that you couldn't have a real life Slimer. Like that guy didn't exist. So, like I had fish, goldfish. Every one of them was named Slimer. Just plain and simple. I was obsessed with Ariel Ghostbusters. It's true. Slimer did get Bronze's camera. But then as I got a little bit older, I mean, I must have been 4 or 5 the first time my dad showed me the Ghostbusters movie. And again, it was on cable. So like it wasn't like he was exposing me to the full brunt of any of this stuff. Like it was children's cartoon shows and play sets, and then it was, cable Ghostbusters. But I loved the idea of these guys whose whole job it was to fight ghosts, to fight these things nobody could see that caused havoc, right? And to do it in such a way that it was both humorous and fun and that people enjoyed, I really liked. Like some kids were into Scooby-Doo for the ghost hunting. I'm like, no, they don't have proton packs, man. The Scooby Gang just has, I think, marijuana and snacks, but no nuclear accelerators. Like, what are you even doing?
I don't know, man. Now that you pitch it that way.
No, but as a little kid, I'm like, I'm out. But regardless, then it got to the point where, okay, I understood that this was more than just, a TV show or movie, right? There were other collectibles. So I had, again, toy sets and all this kind of stuff, but that there were comics, that there were clothes and t-shirts, that there was a fan group, that there were, other people like me who loved this thing. And so that was one of the earliest communities I got into. Was I joined a junior Ghostbusters group
Oh,
that
that's cool.
I found an ad for in an Our Real Ghostbusters comic. Right, and it was kind of like the Mighty Marvel Marching Society. Like, we really didn't do anything. They just sent you
Mhm.
some stuff occasionally, and your parents had to spend some money, but it was all right. It was cool. Like, I
Nice.
still have the patches and things that they sent me. So, I mean, call it what you will. I call it a little bit of a hoarder tendency, but I knew what I was doing. This stuff's worth money now. But the thing that spoke to me most, and I'll ask Bronze his about G.I. Joe in a minute, is the thing that spoke to me most about the Ghostbusters was that they seemed to legitimately be friends, right? Egon and Winston and Peter and, Ray seemed to be legitimately friends who were doing this job together, busting each other's chops. You had Janine and you had some of these other people who were around that were just as interesting, the mayor and Mr. Peck. Like who were just as interesting and who were just as cool a story. But these guys seemed to be genuinely enjoying doing what they were doing. And that was the thing I think that spoke to me the most. It's like, oh, okay, these things are scary, but they're having fun. Now it's not so scary because I was scared to death of ghosts and all that vampires and all that kind of stuff when I was little. I got exposed to it way too young. So I'm like, okay, if these guys aren't scared, why should I be? Oh, and it just turns out that it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, which I thought for the longest time was the Michelin Man. Because
That's
my
weird.
dad worked at a Michelin dealership. So I would go to the Michelin dealership and I'd see the Ghostbusters guy. I didn't know it would be any different, but it just, I let it permeate my life in a way that as we get older, I don't think we do, right? When we're young, the stuff we're into is everything.
Mhm.
A 3-year-old nephew, literally everything that kid is into is Paw Patrol.
So Jay says, why is this marshmallow trying to sell tires? Better question for you. Why is this tire company trying to rate restaurants? And actually, my experience with this Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was not understanding how come Stay Puft marshmallows weren't a thing I could go get at the store.
It's true. Jiffy Puff, man. Anyway, so Bronze, do you have an idea or have you given any thought to why it was that you so connected with G.I. Joe? What about it was, did it have to do with your dad bringing them home from you from trips, or what was it that connected you to those?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I mean, like that element is something where I think it probably catapulted it into like the next level, but it wasn't. I was already in love with it before that, so I was thinking about it, and I hate to give like kind of really cliche answer, but I don't know. Maybe it's of the generation I'm part of, or of the times, or of the area I grew up in. But playing like army guy was a totally legit thing to do. Not as common anymore, I don't think, but it was a pretty popular thing. So I think it kind of tied into that a little bit because I was already into that. And then you mentioned the friend aspect with the real Ghostbusters, and for me, I think maybe it was kind of the team effort. Like we're all working together, and we're really good at what we do. Almost like in a way, probably that some kids would gravitate towards some sports. I think maybe, football, that kind of stuff, team sports. I think that had a lot to do with it. Just seeing that, hey, there's this obvious bad guy organization out there. There's actually people working together to stop them, and not only that, they're like the best there is at what they do, sort of. I think those were part of the things that just tied into it for me. Things that appealed to me, just within the fiber of my being, basically. But then, as I got older, it is interesting. Like, what did make me stay with it and stick with it? Because, like you said, my dad bringing home the comic books, that was a way for him and I to bond. like when we traveled, family vacations, going into comic book stores and looking for back issues. As I got a little bit older, that's something we would do too. And that became an interesting experience. It obviously acted as a gateway into my world of comic books in a major way. Other comic books. And so I think that still kind of tied to it. Like working on, completing the last few parts of the original Marvel run of the comic book for years kept me very engaged in I'd pick up an issue that I'd been missing for a long time, and then I'd go back and reread them. So that kept me into it. And then I think is one of those things that just happens as you get older. You definitely want to revisit those themes, right? And I think that's something that, it's probably going to come up a little bit later in the show. We'll just put it that way. But revisitation of those themes, I think, is a big thing. And I think we're going to kind of talk about that in a little bit. So
yeah, absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our first break. But before we do, I want to give you guys an opportunity. If you would like to call in and talk to Bronze and I about your first fandom, you can do that.
Oh, wait, sorry. I'm already on the show.
Yeah, and I haven't given the phone number yet. So, like, your acting's a little premature, Bronze. Let's not.
Hey, I'm working on it.
I'm going to walk away from the joke. So if you want to call in and talk about your first fandom, you can call in. The phone number is 567-318-6507. 567-318-6507. Jay, if you can make that appear at the bottom of this, there you go. Give us a call if you want to talk about it. We will talk to you live on the air about your first fandom. If you call in and decide to be a jerk, we'll roast you. So figure that one out. So we're going to take our first real quick commercial break. And when we come back, we will keep digging into this first fandom's idea. Download our app on Google Play and the App Store. It's so simple, even my mommy can use it. Did you know that Arthur, King of the Britons, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail was played by a famous Graham? Check out another famous Graham by following our Instagram.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are back talking about our first fandoms, and really, we talked in the first segment. Kyle and I, we got to talk a little bit about our first fandoms, Ghostbusters, G.I. Joe, respectively. We also want to hear about your first fandoms, so make sure you're getting that into the chat, or even better, you can call us at the phone number down below. But as we move into the second segment, until we have somebody on the line, we're going to talk a little bit about why this happens. Like, why do we still talk about it to this day? Why is it something that most nerds will carry forward into their whole lives? And I think the best way to do that is for us to talk about it, for ourselves. So in the chat, I want you to be thinking about that. Think about your first fandom. Tell us what it is if you haven't already. And then think about, why is it something that still matters to you or affects your life now? I mean, there's lots of things that I liked when I was a kid that, maybe I'll think about it because a YouTube video will remind me it existed 25 years later. But I don't constantly have it as a part of my core memories, right? Like, it's not something that's following me in everyday life. But things like G.I. Joe do. Like, I'm, still a big G.I. Joe fan. I still geeked out meeting Larry Hama. I still, seek out G.I. Joe collectibles. I still read the comic books. I introduced my kid to G.I. Joe. Why do those things happen? And for me, I think a lot of it has to do with the power of nostalgia. And all the associations of good memories from when I was a kid.
That was going to be my question: is can you be nostalgic for something that never really left? Right? Nostalgia to me is something that you were a fan of that you then get re-exposed to and come back,
Right.
come back to. Is it? Can you be nostalgic for something that you never left? Like it's that Pam Beasley from The Office. I wish someone would told me we were in the good old days during the good old days.
Yeah.
Like if you never really leave the good old days, like can you have the nostalgia there? Andy,
Yeah.
whoever. I misquoted the quote. Like, that was gonna be part of my question here. But continue. Like, you think nostalgia and what else?
So, but yeah, to expand on that a little bit, like nostalgia for those happy memories, right? Like happy memories and also simpler times. Like, you know, that weird thing that happens when you're a kid playing where you don't think about going to school the next day. You don't think about, as you're an adult going to work the next day. You don't think about chores and troubles and all those other things. You're just focused on playing. You may as well be in a black hole time zone where time doesn't matter because you're just having fun. It's pure joy. And just going back and thinking about that, like thinking about all those adventures I sent my teams of Joes and Cobras on and all that kind of stuff. Anytime that gets touched upon, it hits like a visceral chord. I think that's a huge part of it for me. Also just the the early like social interactions, like talking about it with other kids at school, like having those kinds of memories, uh having it be like an icebreaker. I think that actually affects it a lot too, because now as an adult, what do? Well, I'll go on the internet, talk about GI Joe and make connections, right?
Right.
Go to conventions. That's still something that happens. It's still a through line. So I think that's part of it too. Definitely want to touch in with, we got some people in chat that are bringing up some of their first fandoms here. So I think we should kind of touch on with some of them too.
Yeah, let's do it. But I was going to kind of throw in on this topic that this nostalgia thing, and I talk about how it's something that went away and came back. And while I never walked away from Ghostbusters, there were definitely down periods. Like anyone who's ever been at a Comic-Con and had a booth at a Comic-Con nearby to well, any of your regional Ghostbusters teams. Or I was even at a convention where I was nearby to some of the cast, right? Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson were both there, and they played the Ghostbusters theme, the Ray Parker,
Who are you gonna call?
probably 600 times.
Oh man.
And that may have been a low point for the fandom. When I'm like, hey, this is legally not Huey Lewis. Okay. Like, maybe a low point, but that was certainly, the fact that even that didn't make me angry just shows how much I loved the Ghostbusters. So, yeah, let's get to some of these here. We had Bronze, I'll let you drive the comments, man. I'm getting a little.
Yeah, it's a little tough because I can't really highlight any of them or anything like that. Let's see here.
Oh,
so
you're right.
Back a little bit here, Bri. Yeah, first Phantom, Spider-Man, specifically Spider-Man Unlimited, pure nostalgic joy. Spider-Man Unlimited. That's a cool call out.
Yeah,
that's a very specific. I like the specificity of like almost like this is the arc, right? Like this is the thing that got me into it.
it's true.
That's cool.
Skunk Snot is TMNT, and Skunk Snot has outlined in great detail in the chat how far back his TMNT fandom goes, or their TMNT fandom goes. Back to the original black and white. I mean, original red bandanas aren't even a thing. Those are even a second generation thing. But, you know, black and white meeting Eastman in 92 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Definitely, I'm definitely there with you, Skunk Snot. Like, I'm a big old school Turtles guy.
Well,
Even though, because of my age, I came to them through the cartoon show. I immediately went back and found the Mirage comics, like, and read the wildly inappropriate stuff.
I have a really funny thing about TMNT, or I mean, I think it's funny. I showed up at school, would have been, I think it was first grade, like the first day of first grade or whatever. And I had this moment where all the, you know, boys mostly, I guess, but the kids around me were all kind of talking like, oh, what are you into? What do you like? And they were all talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I didn't know what it was, right? Like everybody apparently over the summer had gotten into it. I had no idea what it was. And so it was like, oh man, I better go catch up and see what this show is. And that was like, that's the other thing about it, right? Like when I talk about the social interactions, it's one of those things that can happen is you can kind of, you know, obviously, so that wasn't my first fandom, but it was those kids' first fandom. And it's kind of infectious, right? When they start talking about it. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Buddy says, two major things growing up. 66 Batman, 65 Star Trek when I was 12 years old and saw Star Wars in 1977. That's when everything changed. And Star Wars, I thank you for saying this, buddy. I really do. Because Star Wars is maybe the thing that made me first start thinking about this, right? Because I'm a Star Wars fan, but I'm not one of these obsessive Star Wars fans that like won't let things go and are constantly Disney killed Star Wars, or you know who I'm talking about, those Star Wars fans. But it got me thinking about how I would feel about if Ghostbusters was dramatically different, which it is now.
I'll say that it had a period where that was a debate for sure.
Right. And it got me thinking about it, and would I feel the same way as those Star Wars fans? And I have an answer, and the answer is no. But I get it. And so Star Wars was a big part of why I started talking about this. What stands out most is the original Superman. My dad watched it with me when I was 3 or 4, and the song still gives me goose. That's exactly it, right? The idea of that memory and having your first fandom still trigger you that same way, right?
Yeah, man. I hear da 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 like the beginning of the G.I. Joe theme song, and it's I'm right in there, man.
Right. I hear the siren. Yep. Okay, I know exactly what's happening. Eddie says his first addiction was Battle of the Planets. But Ed, was that your first fandom? Was that the first thing you would say, you know what, this is going to be a thing I'm a lifetime fan of? Because it's a cool thing, but like, you know, Battle of the Planets is such a unique and niche thing that I can't even wrap my brain around it.
That's awesome, though. I mean, like, I'm all for it.
Nice.
Right on.
No. I'm not going to let you forget about the sequel trilogies or the prequel trilogies or any of the films, because I have to claim the stupid girl Ghostbusters. Okay. Sorry. I'm still trying to, Battle of the Planets, though, like that holds its own place in the back of my brain that just got unlocked because of my uncle was a huge Battle of the Planets guy.
Oh, right on.
Like, he liked Star Trek and he liked Star Wars and he liked all of the space stuff, like Rom Space Knight and some of those, but Battle of the Planets, man. I gotta go find some of those books and find some of that stuff because I gotta get back into that. I'm sorry.
I'll be honest with you. I had to Google it, and yes, I completely instantly recognized the imagery here, but I
Yeah.
don't think I ever saw any of it.
Yeah.
I mean, but like instantly, like kind of like Silverhawks. Like Duke just said in chat. I know I never watched Silverhawks or
Right.
had any of the figures or anything like that, but I know who they are automatically because I
Yeah.
think I
No,
read the comic book or something when I was a kid. But
I had I found today while pricing comics a Biker Mice from Mars comics.
oh yeah,
I'm like, oh man. Uh Biker Mice from Mars unlocked something. So
well,
let's
oh go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go.
Well, so the thing I was going to say I think might actually be better served for some of our final thoughts at the same time, but I had the thought, so I'm just going to say it. Speaking of, a lot of us in the chat, a lot of us watching, I think are going to be of a similar age, some a little earlier, some a little later. But I think we're kind of, from what I can tell from what we're saying here, we're mostly from the same general ballpark, right? You started, Biker Mice from Mars. I started thinking about some like later, cartoons or specific genres of things that happened. I mean, a lot of us in the 80s were kind of caught up in what happened in the big majority of the 80s with the advertising and cartoons and all that kind of stuff that happened, which, kind of infamously now there's more controls in place for that to prevent that from happening so prevalently. But it does make me wonder what some kids from the current generations, like if they were to have this conversation when they're our age, I really do wonder what some of the points will be, because there's so much more access to different things. And I like with my daughter who's 5, like I see her go through things pretty quickly. She kind of, turns onto new things pretty fast. And it does make me wonder if there will be, like a specific thing that pops out to her or other kids that are contemporaries and peers of her and from this generation. It does make me wonder if that's going to be something that is kind of almost more of like an amalgam of a bunch of things that they were exposed to, or like in a specific genre, because it is a bit different now. I mean, of course, there are huge properties out there and stuff like that that people get attracted to. They have movies and cartoons and figures and all that kind of stuff, but it seems like a lot of them there's a lot of similar themes they play upon, so they kind of end up liking all of them.
It's true. But I want to get back to this idea of why do we hold on to these things, right? What about it has caused us to, now that we're into our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, are we still going back to this same well and going, this is the thing? This is my thing. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. What about your first fandom drags you back to it? Brings you back. What is it that causes you to hold it so dearly in your heart? I hate to put it that way, but because it sounds so sappy, but it's true, right? What about your first fandom causes you to go, you know what? I don't care who you are. You can't talk bad about it.
Well, and while we're waiting for some of those responses, I'll get to the other point I was going to make about this particular part of the question. And I think that it goes a little bit of what I just said about us being of a particular generation in the way that sometimes we're catered to now. I think part of it for me is the fact that there's still so much coming out from my fandom today that's still, there's the original G.I. Joe comic book, although it's had some stops and some hiccups and some relaunches, but right now it's still going on. That's still out there. There's been live action movies. There's been, through several different iterations, there's talk of new G.I. Joe Transformer movies coming out. There's all kinds of stuff like that too. So when we talk about Ghostbusters, clearly that's a fandom that's been kept alive with, films now and kind of going through a new period of consideration. I see Ghostbusters toys on the shelves. So there's things like that are keeping it alive. And I think that's true for a lot of the main key fandom. Star Wars obviously hasn't gone anywhere. It's still around. There's content out there for pretty much everybody, whether it's comics or whatever. But yeah, so I think that's the other thing, is that it continues to be something that is catered to, and so it helps keep it alive for a lot of us too in that way. Some things like Battle for the Planets, maybe not as much as others.
It's true, and it's interesting.
Sorry,
because I was. It's a good man. Because it's true. Ghostbusters, for me, they're still making Ghostbusters stuff. For Star Wars fans, they're still making Star Wars stuff. For Batman's fans, they're still making Batman stuff. Like
Star Trek, everything.
Yeah. I wonder I wonder if there's a way to do the math, a way to figure that out. Like how much of our first fandoms are still our first fandoms because there's never been a lull in them.
Well, for Ghostbusters though, there was a pretty good lull.
But there wasn't because there was always comics and novels and graphic novels and kids'
But
books.
I mean, I'll say a quieter period more than a lull.
Sure. And again, there was a certain age that I went through where that stuff was all too young for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. Like, there's definitely but I wonder if there's a way to do that math, right? Like if it has to do with times, right? Like, I tell you what, let's take our second break. We're going to come back and I've got a theory that I need to work out in my head during the break. And we come back, I'm going to put a conspiracy theory out into the universe.
Oh boy.
Well, not conspiracy, a fan theory out into the universe. And we're going to get to any of your comments that we may have missed. We're going to do our plugs. We're going to wrap up and we're going to be out on time this week. So we'll be right back after this word from probably me based on the way these commercials are going. What do you call the place on Spider-Man's wrists where the webs come out? His website. I hate myself for writing that joke, but you'd make me feel so much better if you just visited our website. We have links to our merch, new release lists, all the show info, and so much more. TheEXPLive.com. Twitch. It's not just what happens when you have too many energy drinks anymore. Check out our content over there, too. In a world where you hit like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, that'd be really great. Thanks. I'm just going to throw this out there. Stevie B, please contact Bronze Age Nerd. He may be of interest.
Yeah, the full size GI Joe was never really a big thing for me, but I did get exposed to.
Oh, you didn't have 12-inchers?
Well, from my parents and my uncles' collections, when I found those at like my grandparents' house, I played with those. But yeah, I did have a 12-inch commemorative Cobra Commander and Duke figure they did in like the 90s.
I think I had those as well.
Yeah, they're I looked them up. I was like, oh man, maybe these are worth something. No, nope. They're surprisingly common.
I'll be honest. I had a lot of 12-inch action figures. So,
nice.
Yeah. So I have a theory, and let me put it out there into the universe, and see what y'all think. A study came out a number of years back that kind of got some new traction again as new data came in the last couple of years that says that your musical tastes peak between the ages of 12 and 16. And what they mean by that is that when you're between 12 and 16, the music you become obsessed with at that age, you will always be obsessed with. Doesn't matter how out of style it gets. That's not to say you won't develop other things you like more, or, that you might like those things less, see people who are into R. Kelly or Michael Jackson. But that as time goes on, those are the bands you'll come back to as comfort music. For me, it's certain jazz groups and certain things that I was into when I was in high school because it helped calm my brain down at a time when my brain was not calm. It's why I'm such a fan of Dizzy Gillespie and some of these Art Tatum and some of these random jazz artists that people don't know. People know Dizzy Gillespie, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I wonder if, and the thing about that is that you listen to it at a certain time in your life, then you move on from it, and then as you get older and you're seeking comfort, you go back to it. As you get older and you're seeking mooring, something to grasp onto to kind of plant yourself in place, you go back to it.
Yeah.
Is it the same with this stuff? Was it okay that I was a fan of Ghostbusters, or is it because I was a fan of Ghostbusters when I was young, and then there was a period in my mid to late teens where there wasn't much for me in the Ghostbusters world, and then in my mid 20s there was new stuff that I could get into, and then there was a movie with a bunch of comedians, and then there are these two new movies that are feeding it again. Is there something to that ebb and flow of fandom that drives you to be closer to your first fandoms? I don't expect we're going to get an answer to this. I suspect that if I wanted one, I'd have to come up with a more concise way to say it.
No, but I think my reaction to it though is that it's interesting because it does kind of, what it makes me think about is, when you're a kid, your ability to be influenced is much easier, right? Like you're exposed to it, you like it, you love it, you move on. As an adult, when I encounter new properties or new things or new fandoms, I'm going to look at it in a different way because I'm going to compare it and contrast it to the things I already know. And so, and I kind of think that might be true for music too, because there's sort of a subconscious, like when I listen to new music, it's not just, is it good, but it's also, is it better than the music I already like?
Right.
Is it worse than the music I already like? It's almost like a subconscious barometer. I think the same thing's probably true for movies, for fandoms, for comic books. I think there might be some meat on those bones for sure.
Yeah. So in the comments, I guess we need to Stevie B, comics came into my life when Philip Fish's mother made him throw out his collection that consisted mainly of coverless 80-page Batman annuals. I grabbed them and that was it. I like that his name is Philip Fish.
Yeah.
That feels like a made-up name.
It feels like a name that would be in a Batman 80-page annual.
Or a TV detective.
Yeah.
In fact, what was Fish from Barney Miller's?
Anyway, that's a good question.
After Fish from Barney Miller. It's in answering your question, Bry says it sparks moments of great memory. It sparks great memories and emotion. The joys and carefree nature of being younger, watching someone try to save the world when you're a kid is satisfying as you grow up. Okay, I have a question. Oh, it's Bree. I see it now. Okay, thank you. Anyway, does anybody else have really weird mixed feelings about Captain Planet?
Wait, mixed, like what's the like
how do we not
negative?
have a remake of Captain Planet by now?
Oh, I see.
Like, I have mixed feelings about Captain Planet because, like, I seem to remember this thing being absolutely fire, like, great. And yet we've not remade it. We've not had any new Captain Planet. Like,
I mean, it was absolutely fire and wind and water and earth and heart.
We're literally in a climate crisis when we could be teaching kids. That didn't count.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, if we do bring it back, doesn't Don Cheadle have to be involved on some level? Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like that would be,
that remake didn't count. Yes, Stevie B. Abe Vigoda was Philip Fish on Barney Miller. Which is another one of those weird childhood fandoms that I have. Like, my love for 80s, 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s sitcoms. Anyway, But no, it's so like I said, guys, this was a light, fun little episode as we get out, we've been saving it for one of the weeks when Bronze had his show with Big B McFly, the comic guy. And it just kind of got pushed down to this week. Imagine being the poor kid who gets heart as his or her power. It's true.
I did always feel bad for him.
Wait, is Avatar the Last Airbender of Captain Planet remake? Anyway, we'll deal with that another day. But we just want to have kind of a light conversation, a kind of a get to know you conversation with us. This might be something we do a little bit more as other things kind of, because it's an easy conversation to have.
And it also, like it provides a lens into other things that do matter and
Right.
and thinking about what it means to be a fan or means to be a nerd.
Right. It absolutely does. So, Captain Planet was being green before it was cool. Well, the Hulk was being green before even Captain Planet was cool. Anyway, this is the kind of conversation that me and my friends have when we get together too. Like, whatever happened to that show Eureka's Castle? Like,
Oh wow.
yeah,
Memory unlocked.
right. No, for sure. And now we have a 45-minute conversation about Jim Henson. Anyway, guys, thanks for doing this. We're going to just call it here. I'm going to encourage everybody this week to go back and try to interact with your first fandom in some way. Kind of watch your favorite episode, read your favorite comic, enjoy your favorite moment. And kind of talk to people about it who might not know that about you, because it makes it more interesting. But does the heart ring come with them?
That's what I hope it does. I mean, there you're getting that's your consolation prize for having to get the heart ring.
And I thought the Green Lantern ring was bad. If I insist, from Fiery Phoenix. It's true. Oh man, I just unlocked a Wonder Twins memory. Anyway, so guys, we're gonna get out of here. Bronze and I have, as always, have enjoyed talking with you, and we could tell you right now what's happening next week on this show.
Boom.
We gonna have a guest. Bronze, tell the people what they won.
So if you join us next week, or happen to catch us on the rewind, but we'd prefer you were here live, you'll be treated to a great guest. I think that we're going to have a really fun time talking to Sean Sipple from Overstreet Access, Overstreet of comic books price guide fame. They have a online service for cataloging your comic books, and it's available on their website. It's available via an app. The really cool thing about talking to Sean is we'll get to learn a little bit about the technology. We'll get to learn a little bit about the data side of dealing with comic books, which I think is fascinating. I know they've had some really unique challenges they've faced when they've done that. So I think it should be a really interesting interview talking to him about the process of creating Overstreet Access, what we can expect in the future, and also just some cool stories of the stuff he's encountered while he's been working there too. So,
and I'll tell you guys, Bronze got me onto Overstreet Access after we talked about our How Do You Price Comics episode. And I've been using it now for the last 48 hours pretty heavily, and it is really a nice service. So I'm excited to talk to Sean about it. And maybe, just maybe, it's something that you can start to use for your comic book collecting needs. So that's next week. We're going to talk with Sean from Overstreet Access here on The Devil's Advocates. Until then, Bronze, what do you have happening on the Bronze Age Nerd?
Let's see. So also next Monday, I will have a show with Big B after this one. So stay tuned for that, I guess, next week. I'll have a video coming out hopefully this week talking about destroying comic books for exclusive print runs, destroying the extra copies and the challenges faced with that, with a real world example of doing it. So, when you buy one of those comic books, it's limited to like 200 copies, but the publisher requires 3,000 copies to be printed. What happens with the extras? It's kind of the topic like that. So stay tuned on my channel for that, and we'll talk a little bit about the logistics of it and the kind of problems it creates and why maybe some of the big publishers should change their policies.
And then here on the Experience, we have great shows coming up. Remember, Fat Jacks is now Saturdays at 4 Eastern. 4:30? 4. I don't remember. 4 or 4:30. Jay?
It's 4.
Okay, 4 o'clock. Thank you, Jay. But they will be Saturdays at 4, followed by Jam Comics on the Fat Jam Saturdays, which I need to make a commercial for. But then Jam is also Thursdays at 11. We have a full slate of shows this week, a bunch of great people. And then Saturday is the Super Bowl of comic bookdom. It's free comic book day. So visit comicshoplocator.com to find a comic shop nearby to you. And check it out. Go find a local comic shop. Freecomicbookday.com also has a lot of this information. Find a comic shop nearby to you. Buy things at Free Comic Book Day. Just because it's Free Comic Book Day doesn't mean it's free for stores. Buy stuff. I will be going to a comic shop I've never before been to for Free Comic Book Day.
Interesting.
Well, I'm traveling a little this weekend.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm forced to go to a shop I've never been to. And I'm very excited about it because their Free Comic Book Day is different than my local comic shop Free Comic Book Day.
I look forward to hearing the report.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it. And then, guys, be on the lookout. Something big is happening here at the Experience. We're doing something new. And I'm not going to tell you what it is until Wednesday. But just know it's happening. So be watching for a video from me on our YouTube page about what's happening. So, I will be back tomorrow. K-Pop and I are in the same region, so she's asking me where I will be going. K-Pop, I will be going to Green Brain Comics in Dearborn, Michigan. I only have one comic book shop on our island. That's fine. Big group and 7 kids. Nice.
Wow,
Fantastic,
that's awesome.
Mr. Nope.
That's great.
K-Pop, if I can break away from what I'm doing, I will be heading over to State of Comics as well. And also trying to hit Big Ben's. So that's stuff that only matters. Well, there you go. So K-Pop and I will likely run into each other, and she'll recognize me, and I won't recognize her, but it'll be all right. It'll be all right. So we will see everybody at Free Comic Book Day, and we'll see everybody next week here on The Experience. We know you probably get a lot of emails, but could you please make sure to sign up for our mailing list? We don't send a lot of emails, and we try not to bother you. We just want to give you the best information about all the cool stuff that's going on around here. Sign up on our website, theexplive.com.